Okay, everybody, we are going to start our next session, which is also an interview with Dominic Harris. He's from Carbonquota. You're one of the founders of Carbonquota.
I am one of the founders.
Sustainability should be a four-letter word, right? I mean, the amount of information and demands that are coming from us. And by the way, I firmly believe that we should do something to help the world stay here intact. But there is truth, there is uncertainty, and then there is just downright greenwashing, inaccurate information because there are products and services to be sold around a topical topic like this when people just want to prove that they're trying to do the right thing in some manner. So I preface this interview with that because when Dominic joined up to be part of DNA and we had a conversation, the first thing I said to him is that first you're going to have to convince me that everything you're saying is true. Provable, repeatable, and there is solid data behind it. And he did.
I did.
He did.
Thank God, I was going to leave the stage then.
Okay, and he did. And that is why we actually turned this session into an interview and not a presentation, because we believe that there is enough inaccuracy out there that if you want to ask questions, if you want to try to poke holes in things, that you also have the same opportunity I had. But that doesn't mean this is going to be a Debbie Downer interview because, like I said, Dominic did prove his point to me, and there is a light at the end of the tunnel, that there is a company in this room that could actually help you with some of your sustainability goals. So that was a very long way to say, Dominic Harris, welcome to the stage.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. Thank you.
So why don't you first, let's start off with sharing with everybody a little bit about your background and how you came to be a founder of Carbonquota.
Yep, sure. So I'm a lifelong print guy, actually. So I was 16 years old. I started in the print sector. I started in the print sector when I was 16. So I spent many years in the sector, moved through the packaging industry, moved through the print management industry, and then about 4 years ago I had the opportunity to set up a business, which is our business now, Carbonquota. And the reason we set the business up was that we recognise that the industry, as Deborah said, is very good at greenwash. We also are very passionate about our industry and believe that it has an opportunity to drive leadership in the wider manufacturing base. And there are means and ways of running a business sustainably. There's means and ways of reducing your carbon footprint, not only for yourself and your own business, but the products you produce. And 4 years later, we've got hundreds of customers. We're dealing with some of the biggest brands in the world, and it's all about science, and it's all about how do we help businesses measure scientifically the impact of the thing they're making. Yeah, and that's what it all comes down to. So that's the premise of the business. I'm surrounded by a great team. I'm just one of 25 people. I've got scientists that work for me. I'm not a scientist. I'm just a print guy. Yeah. So I've got scientists that work for me. We've got developers that work for us, and that business is booming. There's lots of help, coming through. We're winning lots of new customers. So it's very exciting times now.
So I'm glad that you position print as part of the manufacturing industry because, I mean, when I think of manufacturing, and it might just be when I grow up, I think of like factories with black smoke coming out of it. That's what manufacturing is to me. And when I go into a print shop, no matter how green they tell me they are, I see exhaust pipes for fumes, and I see a chemical room, and I see people covered in ink and oil and things like that. So are we just trying to put lipstick on a pig here? That's an American expression, by the way. I don't know if that translates.
Yeah. So every manufacturer has three things. When you look at it through a carbon lens, there's raw materials, there's processing, and there's transport. Yeah, we actually do 16 things in that life cycle, but broadly speaking, there are three things. It's actually circumstantial what you're manufacturing. It's three things. It's raw materials, it's energy use because you're converting something, and then it's how do you send it to your customer. But they are equally as important as each other. And the challenge therefore becomes, if you're buying raw materials, how do you know that is a lower carbon raw material? What you can control is your own factory. So you could buy renewable energy, you can install, different sort of types of solar power. But then also, you can also control your downstream transport. So when you look at those things to that very simple 3-point plan, you actually can influence your carbon footprint. And we work with businesses, we're very lucky enough to work with Lush, who are, a fantastically forward-thinking business. And they insist, and it's a really interesting story, Deborah, they insist that their print suppliers, anybody who does display, anybody who does consumer packaging, those suppliers have to carbon footprint the products they supply them. If they don't, they simply do not have an opportunity to work with Lush.
Yeah.
And that's the way the business is going. Yeah.
I couldn't agree with you more that there are bigger entities than a solo print shop that are going to drive this, and it's up to those print businesses whether they want to honestly get printing dollars moving forward from companies like that who have made it mandatory that their supply chain is at least doing something.
Yes.
Nobody's saying 100%. I mean, even when they make big changes, they always say by 2030, by something.
Yeah.
So, because these things have to be incremental. Oh, we don't want to use plastic anymore. Okay, well, we don't have a solution yet for what that's going to go in if it's not plastic. And by the way, rotting food is less sustainable than a plastic bag because of all the energy that goes into dealing with things like that. So it has to be a agreed upon change, a collective change, and everybody moves forward together. And that's kind of where we are now. Would you agree with that?
I was just going to pick you up on that. Plastic actually is the demon, but it's not. Scientifically, it is not the demon. I'm not saying it's the right thing, but ultimately, if everything's measured correctly through a scientific lens, you can make choices. And your example there around, you go into a supermarket and you get given a plastic bag, and most of them have switched to paper bags now. Paper bag has got a higher carbon footprint than a plastic bag.
Yeah.
And it's just a issue that's happening in consumers. So everything has to be a science-led decision when you're fighting climate change, right? It's got to be science-led.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I completely agree with you on that. And I also, I was once speaking to a gentleman about flexible packaging, and he was telling me it was more sustainable than paper packaging. And I was like, really? But it's made of plastic. I don't understand. He's like, fully recyclable plastic, reusable, reclaimable, as where you put a shiny thing on a box and nobody at the recycling center knows what to do with it. So it's not, there really is a way better story for that. But let's focus on what we can do. But more important, what we can do that we can actually feel good about, because not only can we prove it, but we can share it as part of a marketing strategy.
Yep.
That's not related to we're green, print with us.
Measure. That is the first starting place for any business, is to measure your carbon footprint. I'll get technical for 1 second. That is scope 1 and 2, and that means your operational boundary. But that is the first and simplest place to start, is measure your carbon footprint. That creates a baseline, and you should repeat that every single year. And against that baseline and repeating process, you then create a net zero pathway. And a net zero pathway is a very grand, scary word, but it's very simple. What are you going to do to reduce your carbon footprint of a of a factory. Are you going to get rid of your trucks? Do you get rid of forklift trucks for electric trucks? They're better than diesel trucks. You put those plans in your net zero pathway, and every year, just keep remeasuring. To have an annual, it's called an annual assessment. We do them, we certify them, and it's an annual carbon footprint. And what that shows is you are on a net zero pathway. That creates beautiful content, as Deborah said. It should be on your website. You should be transparent about it. You can share it with your customers. And ultimately, that's the best place to start for any business.
So you just very relaxing, sitting there saying, just measure your carbon footprint. Just do that. Just do that at a print shop. Just measure it.
Yeah.
How in God's name do you measure your carbon footprint for when every job is different, when there's different amount of paper in the print shop at any time, there's a different amount of trucks on the road. So how do you do something like that?
Yeah, so what I was talking there was scope 1 and 2, and that's a reasonably simple place to start. Our view is, and most, there are many businesses like Carbonquota around the industry. You really should use a third party. And I always say that it's like when you do your financial accounts at year end. You don't do them yourself, you pay your accountant to do them. It's the same with carbon accounting. The word, why it's called carbon accounting is very important to get a third party to do that. The second part of your question is around product carbon footprinting. So if you are a packaging provider, if you're creating point of sale, FSDUs, brochures, flyers, books, it doesn't matter. In the past year or so, there's been a massive increase from the mega brands around having product carbon footprinting. So if you think of a book and you say, what's the carbon footprint of that book? That's constructed of a number of things. The raw materials. There's a little bit of energy there for printing it, but it's only about 15% of the carbon footprint. So most of it's raw materials and most of it's downstream transport. So, and that area can be complex. And again, that's, this is why we exist, is we help with these things. And we've automated that process with partnerships with all the e-productivity software houses, people like Fasten, Print IQ, any MIS or ERP system that a print shop uses, we can automate the carbon calculations via that. But that's really the second part of the story. The first part is get going on something, start on scope 1 and 2, get it published, use it as part of your marketing, and repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat.
I don't want to do a deep dive on this, but is it like a questionnaire? So can maybe just, is it a simple thing to do? Do you need 20 people involved in your business to provide measurements and information for you? Like, how long does it take to get an accurate
That's a good question.
assessment?
It's a really good question. So we have a piece of software and it surveys a customer. So we ask for pertinent information. So I'm talking about scope 1 and 2 here again. So we ask what your energy use is. We ask what you spend on certain areas like paper and transport. We collect information, and that's all done via a very simple interface. That interface then processes that data, and it presents back the carbon footprint. So it's a software-led solution. So usually the work that needs to be done by a print shop, a printer, is what type of energy did I buy? And they might need to look at their energy bill and tell us what type of energy it is. Or they could just email it to us. It's the same thing, really, for us. So it's just collecting data. We process that automatically in our applications, and then we present the data back in a client-ready dashboard, so people can see what the carbon footprint is. And that can be then shared from the dashboard, and you can send it to your customers. You can even embed it on your website if you want to. So there's quite a lot of cool things there.
So when people, or at least when I think about offsetting my carbon footprint, which I have to tell you, I don't really think about a lot. I think of it more as in, buy this thing other than this thing, which I guess is reducing my carbon footprint in a way. But I'm not like looking around my house and saying, can I get a solar TV or something like that? So now you have what? A number that you're trying to offset? And I guess what I was trying to get at is that the only way I understand, and it's probably through advertising and potentially misinformation, the only way to offset my carbon footprint is to plant trees. Is that correct?
There are many, many ways to offset, but that is should only be discussed. If you talk to anybody in the scientific fraternity, you've got to reduce first. If you're in the luxurious position that you can donate money to a scheme that has environmental benefits, fantastic. But the first thing has to be is reduce. We say, you know, we deal with quite small print shops through to very large, you know, print businesses that have got a global footprint. And we always say to them that if you've got a spare $5,000 to spend on offsetting, why don't you invest that $5,000 into solar or change part of your vehicle fleet or do something that means you're reducing, because you're investing money in something that has a lower carbon footprint that will have a lifelong impact on the carbon footprint of that business. So that's our stance on it. And we, you know, offsetting has had a bad reputation. There are some bad schemes, really bad schemes with lack of transparency against them. Equally, there are some very good schemes as well. So, but ultimately, I don't think anybody should be at that place. They should be focusing on reducing the carbon footprint of their operation.
Okay, so I mean, no offense, but everybody could do that without your help at all. But they just can't prove that it had some significant impact on their business, and therefore, honestly, make your clients feel good about working with you. That's what it boils down to. A lot of this is very emotional for people. Not for the big brands, though.
No.
For the big brands, they're like, we don't want to get caught in some craziness with Nike seeing their shoe boxes in landfills when they don't, you know, have all these environmental programs. They don't want to get caught in that, and it becomes really our responsibility to be able to provide information back and say, look, this is what we're doing, and we have proof of that. So let's get to that, because that is what won me over with you, your company. Can you share with everybody how you can accurately measure the information that the print shop need, or the printer needs, or the business needs, or the factory needs, in order to know that they have actually reduced their carbon footprint? And if you're planting trees, how do you prove that you're planting trees?
I'll park the tree question, because trees isn't really part of the conversation. I think the important part is carbon footprinting is a science. I've used that word a lot. It is set to international standards. We work for GHG protocol, we work to ISO standards, and all proper carbon management businesses should and must work to international standards. And what that means is it's been verified by a third party. We're also the certifying body, but most importantly, we know and buy and access data that changes every single year. So, for example, the energy mix in Germany changes on a regular basis. The energy mix in every state across the US changes on a regular basis when they shut down a coal power station or move more to nuclear, or whatever it might be. It's an ever-moving feast, and it's, to me, it has to be a specialist task. And like I say, we've got 25 people doing it. So that's a you know, there's a lot of work that goes into this stuff to make sure it's up to the highest possible quality. And we work with some great brands. We're lucky enough to, because we work with the big brands, people like Lush and IKEA and Procter & Gamble and Unilever, we hear their side of the story. But equally, we work with the smallest print shop. So we get both sides of the story, and we try to connect those two things together. And that's the piece that's important here, because historically there's always been a disconnect. The big brand, you know, stamping on the print shop, saying, give me this information, and the print shop not knowing what to do. It's really hard. So ultimately, we've connected those two things together, and that's a really important part, because it helps our industry.
Does anybody have any questions or comments for Dominic? I mean, I could ask him questions all day long. Anyone? Well, if you do, just raise your hand and I'll come over with the microphone. can you share, I would love you to share a client success story from a client that started off like me, not believing a word that you say, that you might, of this, is this even possible, to being a firm believer of the process and how it benefited their business.
So there's a business in the UK, I won't name them because it'd be slightly inappropriate, but
Of course.
there's a business in the UK that has a padded envelope, a jiffy bag, okay, which is used to transport things to protect them. They're a big business, and they've manufactured a new type of envelope that has got no plastic content. So a jiffy bag typically has got plastic inside it. So it's 100% recycled content going in. Therefore, it's 100% recyclable going out. And they knew fundamentally this is a nice product. It was a very green, I don't like that word, but it was a very green product. But they didn't know scientifically how good it was. And we went through that journey with them. We did a product carbon footprint of a jiffy bag versus their version of the new one. And the carbon footprint was 64% less, which is enormous difference. So what they then do is say, we've got this certified number. You know, we give them what's called an LCA report, a report that says this is how we carry the study out.
Just tell them what LCA.
Sorry, life cycle assessment. Sorry, I can get technical sometimes. A life cycle assessment report. And that report then goes to their customers. And they've now opened up new customers, including Amazon, which is very impressive because they're very hard to deal with, new customers, and they're selling that product because they've demonstrated, A, it's better than the old style, but B, we are continuously improving it by doing certain things in their factory. So I think that's a lovely story.
It is a lovely story. And
Yeah.
I get those bags now without
Okay,
the
there we are.
plastic inside
Yeah.
them. It's really interesting. Okay. What is the danger of not doing anything? Business-wise.
Business-wise, I think we have seen examples, and again, I'm not going to name people, of businesses losing contracts because they're not doing anything. Transversely, we saw an example of a business win a contract because they were doing something. And I don't think I could be any clearer than that. It was £1 million a year contract in the signage sector. Yeah, so lots of plastics, lots of vinyls. They lost the contract because of that. They didn't do anything, but somebody else won it. And that's the risk of not doing something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I would also add that, you know, I was a print customer for over 25 years in advertising agencies, and there were reasons that I worked with vendors, and there were reasons why I didn't work with vendors. And when someone approaches you, which is usually printers approach you and say, we've got the best price, the best quality, and the best service. And I'm like, that's lovely. What else do you got? And if this is something that's important to those companies, then this is a differentiator that really cannot be matched if no one else is really being certified in a way that they can prove that the data is real.
Yep. I mean, if you work for a retailer, any retailer around the world, they are very advanced in this world. And if it's consumer packaging, if it's retail point of sale, anything to do with that retailer, if they're not doing it now, certainly in the European market, which I'm very familiar with, that's commonplace. If you work with a luxury brand, again, it's very, very commonplace that they select their supply chain based on their sustainability credentials. Absolutely critical. But that's getting much wider, even the building sector. So anybody who prints anything to, you know, dress a pillow or put on the carpet, the same thing applies there. And that story is getting more and more every month we go by.
Excellent. Well, does anyone have any comments or questions? Anybody? Okay. Well, Carbonquota is directly back there. I would suggest that if you have any interest in this topic, that you stop by the booth or you look them up online, that you get in touch, and that in some way, shape, or form, you start your journey to have a better story with your customers. So thank you all so much for joining us.